Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the Pakistan's foreign policy, the challenges and the opportunities. So primarily, since we are talking about this transition period of the new world order, so obviously whether we like it or we don't, the blocks between, you can say, Russia and China in Asia put together versus the West, in particular United States of America. Whosoever becomes the President of America, and while we are listening to the first speech when the President is delivering, they always talk about their adversaries. So there was a time when the Cold War was going on between the Soviet Union and America. So we knew during the 50s, 60s and 70s in particular that the major adversary of the United States of America is Soviet Union. Then later on, we got to know that China is also an adversary of America. So now primarily these two countries. Now whatever is happening currently, and I think a lot has changed after the month of February 2022 when the Russians invaded Ukraine. Now there are two different perspectives. One is a Western perspective in which they say that Vladimir Putin is none less than Hitler. He is a villain. That's how he's been portrayed. But if you look at the approach of the Russians, they believe that the NATO is right behind in their backyard, and their plan to expand eastward is something which we will not allow. So this was exactly what was happening, and eventually a war broke out, and we hope and pray that it ends soon, because at the end of the day, war is not a solution, it's a problem itself. Secondly, you talk about the change after 2011, the Arab Spring. A lot changed in the Middle East, especially in the northern Africa. You talk about Afghan issue, was there and still is pending. It's been 40 years, the issue hasn't been resolved. And then obviously we talk about the Taiwan issue with the Chinese, though look at their trade and everything seems as if everything is just perfect. But yes, Americans, they have more than 8,000 bases all over the world. Yes, 8,000. That's a huge number. But whether they're small or big, whether in Korea or Japan or Germany or Scandinavia, and you name it, they're everywhere. Now another story that I read last night says that the NATO, since there is this NATO summit going on in Madrid in Spain, and they have decided to increase the NATO armed forces by another additional 300,000 troops, and they'll be stationed in the Eastern European area. What is that supposed to mean? Definitely, again, $1 million question. Pakistan, India, Pakistan, China, Pakistan, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, again, huge challenges for Pakistan as well. The new name of the game is no more the traditional diplomacy. It's called the economic diplomacy. And that is exactly what is important. If there is a proper economic stability in any country, there is political stability, and that leads to permanent growth. That's how countries, in fact, move forward, and they make sure that the livelihood of their people is maintained. Now, we'll be talking about this, but before I introduce you to our panelists, our production team has prepared a report. Let's watch that first.
Pakistan, under the leadership of Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, is excelling at many fronts, specifically in foreign policy domains, which strongly propagate the interdependent global as well as regional development. In this regard, Pakistan's Minister of State of Foreign Affairs, Hiran Rabbani Khair, said that Pakistan is not in isolation and country's foreign policy is moving in a very right direction, with all the diplomatic missions working on all fronts. China, in this regard, recently recognized Pakistan's role in the global as well as regional development, and Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Yao Lijian in a statement said that Pakistan is an important member of the group of friends of the Global Development Initiative, and China highly value the important role of Pakistan in promoting global development and advancing implementation of the United Nations 2030 agenda for a sustainable development and boosting regional cooperation. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Yao Lijian also said that China will continue to support Pakistan in developing its economy, improving people's livelihood, and maintaining financial stability.
Foreign policy of Pakistan for the new era, for the coming decades. that is what we'll be discussing in our today's program. Let me quickly introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio, on my right is Brigadier Retired Shahid Jagir Saab, Senior Analyst. Thank you very much, sir, for your time. And we'll be talking to our Ambassador, Excellency Jauhar Saleem Saab, who is stationed in Italy. Thank you very much, Excellency, for your time as well, sir. Pleasure to have you in the program. And from United States of America, we'll be talking to Anwar Iqbal Saab, who's a senior journalist. He's based in Washington, and he'll be shortly joining us. But let me put the first question to you, Brigadier Saab. Now, sir, when we talk about the foreign policy of Pakistan, sir, well, consistency in many areas, especially when we talk about China-Pakistan relationship, we talk about Pakistan-Iran, Pakistan-Saudi Arabia, or these Arab states, in particular UAE, or Bahrain, or Kuwait, or Qatar for that matter, so UAE in particular. And then now expanding towards Russia, and then making sure that the terms which earlier we had were not that great with India, and it has always been an adversary of Pakistan. So now we generally believe that there should be trade taking place, there should be more stakeholders involved, so that, you know, at the end of the day, I'm not saying that issues should be kept aside. Issues should be taken care of. For example, Kashmir, for example, Sirkari, for example, Siachen, and so many other, water dispute, and you name it, and they're there. But at least there should be a way forward. Do you think, sir, this new era, the new challenges, and the future of diplomacy, so all over the world, especially post this particular pandemic of COVID-19, things have changed drastically, sir. Your take, sir.
Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. You have very rightly pointed out in your introduction that we are going through an era which is very challenging, which is sharply, fastly changing. The technology advancement has brought us to a level where every day a new invention is going to come. So this has put the world in a challenge where one nation is competing technologically with the other. Now, in such type of scenario, as we have seen with the COVID-19 during the last 2 years, it's important that any foreign policy should focus on the national interest of a country. As far as Pakistan is concerned, our economic challenges are the dominant one of everything, and it is now the art of diplomacy of our foreign office that, while keeping their national interest in the mind or supreme, how they deal with the world outside and put the country on an economic prosperity's path. Our relations should be crafted with the other world in such a way that where we do not antagonize anyone, we do not go into a competition with anyone, we do not try to dominate anyone. At the same time, we should look for a foreign policy which is giving a nation a pride. Nation problems, economic problems are served, and core economic interests are guarded.
Correct.
Irrespective, it's USA, Russia, China, India, or any other country in the world. We must have a very close relations with our Muslim brothers in the West Asia and Arabia. We must have a very craft a very fine balance, whereas, as you have said, that we must have relations with US, we must have relations with European Union, we must have relations with
your biggest trading partners.
UK, we must have relations with Russia, we must have relations with China, which is our all-weather friend. So, keeping in view the environment which are developing, we are at the moment, I would say no country in the world can stay isolated or dominate the other. So it is very important that we now, our diplomats have done a very good job in the past, and I'm sure that we will be able to sail through this tough times.
Yes, but at the end of the day, sir, one has to be optimistic, positive, and at the same time, I would say realistic also. Now, let's go to Excellency Jauhar Saleem Saab. Saleem Saab, one basic question. Sir, the diplomats of the 80s or 90s, they were different than those who were serving in the early 2000 and then post 2010 also. But sir, now there is a need that it's not only about the selection of the appropriate words to draft something or using the diplomatic tone or the language. Perhaps it requires much more. Do you think, sir, there has to be a certain agenda, a proper guideline for our diplomats also, that yes, those times are gone. Now, when I see the card, the visiting card of the visiting Hungarian foreign minister, so the word foreign minister wasn't there. It was economic diplomacy. So economy, money, trade, investments, multinational corporations, their companies coming over, our companies perhaps should go there as well. And then this exchange of manpower. I mean, this is what the name of the game is, sir. Just like, for example, there was a time that countries like Saudi Arabia, totally dependent on the oil exports. Now they are thinking on other lines. Isn't it the time that Pakistan should also focus on what is the need of the hour? How to move forward in the modern era? Brig was talking about technology. Yes, sir, technology is the name of the game. Now we talk about cyber security. Nobody used to talk about that earlier. Now we talk about space missions that will guide us in the future rather than developing new tanks. Yes, that is also necessary, but whatever we have witnessed, that no matter how big a superpower you are, it is very difficult to invade a country, just like what we are witnessing in Ukraine for that matter. The overall philosophy of diplomacy has changed. Sir, please throw your light on this.
Thank you. I think it's very important, first of all, you rightly pointed out the increasing importance of economic diplomacy. What are the generally speaking, what are the most important objectives of any foreign policy? Well, there are two: security and economic development or economic security. Now, these two are they're intertwined. They are symbiotically, they are intrinsically linked to each other, because a country which does not have a solid economy, which is not doing well economically, cannot provide the infrastructure that it needs for security. And a people which are not being provided economic security would, of course, not be as good at ensuring the security of the country's, let's say, territorial integrity, as if they are well provided for. Now, countries such as Pakistan, developing countries, for those countries, it's a very important priority. Now, what has changed, if we talk about the 80s or 90s and 2000s and now the 2020s, what has changed is that the global economy has changed. This is the era of what we call the new economy. Now, many would say that presently, there was a time when economic development was about self-sufficiency, for instance. It was about industrializing a country. Now, economic development is more about integrating with the global economy. Economic growth and economic development now is more a function of a country's ability to attract foreign investment, foreign technology, foreign tourism, foreign trade. And that is why we saw this very much enhanced focus on what we call geoeconomics rather than geostrategy. So in our foreign office, what we have seen in the last few years a great deal of emphasis on economic diplomacy. A lot of our embassies, for instance, I would include the embassy that I'm heading here now, Italy. I think we spend much of our time now in trying to promote the economic interests of the country. And what are the economic interests? To have more trade, to have more investments coming, to have more tourists coming, to have more remittances. Remittances constitute a very important segment of Pakistan's economy. And just to give you an example, in Italy, what you see in the last few years, the trade between Pakistan and Italy has really doubled, particularly in terms of exports from Pakistan. They have doubled in the last couple of years.
I would really, in fact, would like to say that I think Mr. Stefano did a great job during his stay in Pakistan as an ambassador of Italy. Isn't it, sir? I think the credit goes to him also, and plus people like you, yourself.
Definitely. I think the credit goes primarily to our exporters, primarily to the businesses in Italy and Pakistan. Because at the end of the day, they are the ones who have to do trade. We can just be facilitators. We can just be providers of better information. We can keep them better informed. And then at the end of the day, it is the businesses which do it. So I would say kudos to businesses in Italy and Pakistan. Similarly, you see in Germany, I was ambassador there for 4.5 years. We saw about 40-50% increase in trade in that period. And in many other countries in Europe, in the US, you see that, the trade with the US. Pakistan's overall exports have gone up sort of very significantly in this financial year. So we see that. I think that recognition is there. And the growing recognition that economics, so to speak, constitutes the core pillar of security. I think that is more and more evident. And there's not even a conflict of opinion on that. I think this is a view which is now worldwide accepted. And particularly for developing countries such as Pakistan, it's even more important. We are the 5th largest country in the world now in terms of population. And our GDP size, the size of our GDP, it is much, much smaller than that. And we have to reach there. In terms of our military strength, Pakistan is, of course, a nuclear potential country. It's a nuclear power. So that is there. But even that infrastructure needs economic development. And we have seen in the last year, for instance, economic growth figures that they have been good, like 5.9%. But we have to sustain that. We are facing some challenges, and these are very serious challenges. For instance, this balance of payment crisis, in a way, the challenge of having a balanced trade. It's a big challenge for a country such as Pakistan, particularly in this era, particularly in this sort of this pandemic post-pandemic period. Particularly in this period when we have increasing conflicts in the world, which are impacting upon commodity prices in the world. For instance, the oil prices, for instance, other than energy, even the food prices, even the metal prices. So all these increase the weight on a country, burden on a country, because you have to import those. And if you have a lopsided trade, then that can develop into a BOP crisis.
All right.
Which could.
All right. Now, coming to you, sir, raise up a couple of points. Let's talk about the current situation with the United States of America. During the previous government, when Imran Khan was the prime minister, the American president did not call him, and we all thought that things are not that great. And then the open statement from the former prime minister that absolutely not, we will not allow them to do this. Well, everybody criticizes him as well, that this is not the diplomatic tone the prime minister should use. Always keep the options open. There is no end. This is what diplomacy is all about. As they say that, what does it mean? It means that, anything which is impossible, but you have to come up with a solution, So that sounds great. But now it seems that after the visit of the foreign minister, Mr. Bilawal Bhutto, to United States of America, and then he also went to China. And things are getting a little better between the Americans and the Pakistan. Obviously, when we talk about the trading partner, America is the largest trading partner. And I mean, when we talk about our stakes, they were always there. But now, since we got to hear about this Beaker agreement with the Indians and the Americans, the strategic partnership that we always end up hearing, we thought we were the strategic partners. No, sir, we were the transactional partners. Whether the status still exists or no, I'm not sure about that. But the issue is that at the end of the day, Americans need India more than they need Pakistan. They have withdrawn from Afghanistan. They have blamed us for their failures over there. And you talk about aid or otherwise. I mean, only recently now we are hearing that we'll be out of the grey list of FATF, or again there was another story in the paper that the IMF approved certain amounts because the Americans asked them to. So the influence of the Americans, whether in the financial setup of the global banking system or the SWIFT system, or perhaps their say as far as United Nations is concerned, sir, that's a reality. Chinese, yes sir, we do understand, are really doing brilliantly well, and they are picking and they are getting close to the Americans. But sir, I don't think it will be done in another 5-10 years. It might take another 40-50 years. America still is the sole superpower, and how they in fact attract the West along with them, that's another reality. How important is it, sir, to strike a balance when we talk about a foreign policy between the Americans and the Chinese, between the Russians and the Americans? How to go about it now?
Okay. I at times say and think that diplomacy is like playing a chess, and a good chess player, he plays quietly till the time he says checkmate. Right. So that is probably the answer of your first question which you put up. You don't, in the diplomacy, you don't use loud words, because the words are calculated in the diplomacy, and especially from a man of highest pedestal, he has to think 10 times when he speaks. Whatever he wants to do, but that's a different story. The second question is, as you have said, that how should we go about? As we have said in the introduction, that the world is changing, the relationships are changing. Technology is the dominant factor in the relations. The economic dependence of the world nations on each other in 21st centuries have increased so much that anything developed in Europe, Russia, America or China is in a week or so is available in Pakistan, country like Pakistan also. So you are dependent on each other. If you read the book of the New World Order, certain things are very clear, as you have very rightly pointed out, that yes, America is losing ground in the world affairs, but it is still the superpower. China, yes, gaining ground in the world affair, but still it is not compatible with
so the West, they always in fact initiate the narratives. Chinese do not, Russians do not. Whenever sanctions are imposed, it is always by the Americans on either Chinese or on the Russians, not the other way around. Why is that so?
Okay.
So that means that yes, United States of America is indeed the sole superpower.
The second thing is, but that Russians, as the followers of Confucius, they believe more on action than to speaking, than to making hue and cry and everything. And they have demonstrated that. The third Chinese aircraft carrier, which is nuclear capable, is going to be in the water very soon, you know. So, that's a but the fact of the matter is that Americans and the European Union, they control all the international institutions, and they control the word passed through those people. As far as, and they twist the arms, the one who does not abide or align with their policy, through, not through the war, but through these financial institutions, because developing and underdeveloped countries are always in need of money, which these financial institutions give to these nations. The second thing is that keeping in view this thing that China is a rising superpower, they want in South Asia one partner who can, you know, challenge China. Pakistan, being the friend of China, will never do this. So, who will do it is India, and that is why they are supporting the Indians. That is why they are forming part of the Quad. India is a big population. They have the resources. They have the economic human manpower also. And the one good thing about the Indian is, if you read the recent Jaishankar's interview, they probably believe in non-alliance philosophy. But actually, what they are
that's
doing,
the name of the game, sir, because they have Russia as strategic partners, which the Americans recognize. They do not force them to stop buying oil from them. And at the same time, the Americans are strategic partners. When it comes to China, biggest trading partner. I mean, this is what
India is the one, is the country which is getting oil from Russia despite all this what is happening. India is the one which has never spoken up about against Russia in the Ukraine-Russian war. India is the country which is still getting the military hardware from Russia. So, that is what the art of diplomacy is. That, as I said, when you and me are playing a chess, we are having a coffee also, we are chit-chatting also, but actually we are playing the chess. So, our focus at the moment should be that we should craft a policy in a way where China has always stood behind us and will stand behind us, because it is not that they have the love like of Pakistan, but because their national interest and our national interest coincides with each other.
Yes.
Russians will stand with us till the time their national interest will coincide with us. Americans somehow, as forgetting the name, British Prime Minister in the Second World War.
The bald, big guy.
Yes, you know what he said? Churchill. He said, American
Winston
Churchill. Problem with the Winston Churchill. Yeah. Problem with the American is that they come to the best option after having exhausted all the options. Now, they should be thankful to Pakistan, because Pakistan is the one who has rescued them not from Afghanistan. We are the one who bridged between China and Pakistan, which resulted into their getting out of Vietnam.
Visit, we all remember. Sir, if you allow me, sir, we've been joined in by Anwar Iqbal Saab from Washington, a senior journalist. Iqbal Saab, Assalamu alaikum, and thank you very much for taking out your time and talking to us.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you for inviting me.
Sir, pleasure is all ours. Now, Anwar Saab, tell us about, ever since there is a regime change in Pakistan and then the visit of the foreign minister, Mr. Bilawal Bhutto to USA. After that, looking at the media, the kind of columns that are printed, what the television says about Pakistan and America, do you think the ice is melting and things are getting better between these two countries, or you believe that it's still the same?
Well, there has been some sort of movement forward, and it's mainly because the Americans were very upset with the former Prime Minister's visit to Moscow. So that thing has gone. I mean, Americans thought that was a wrong decision, that Pakistan should not, but the Pakistani Prime Minister should not have been there in Moscow, and they believe that the new set of rulers in Pakistan will not take such a step. And even if they do, they will actually consult the Americans before doing so. Having said that, I think the regime changes either in America or in Pakistan only go so far. There are long-term national interests that actually persuade governments to establish or not establish close relations with the country. And in that sector, in that frame, I see some, although very little, but some changes in Washington. There is a realization that Pakistan is not a country that can be abandoned. There is a realization that India is not Pakistan. It's not going to do exactly as Washington expects it to do, that on several issues like their ties with Iran, like their purchase of petroleum from Russia, they will take independent decisions. So the American policymakers think that it is good for them as well as for Pakistan to stay engaged with Islamabad and maintain some sort of ties with this whole aligned region.
And it brings up another point. You mentioned about the visit of the former Prime Minister to Russia. Why should America, intervene in our foreign policy, number one? And interestingly, on top of that, when Mr. Bilawal Bhutto, the current foreign minister, visited America, he in fact said very categorically that there was nothing wrong, the Prime Minister visiting another country, and it was consulted very deeply with the former secretaries and a lot of people, and even the military was on board as well. So what I'm saying is that, is America going to decide what Pakistan needs to do, or we need to decide what we need to do?
No. Again, it all depends on how you approach this issue. America was not going to decide what, they didn't say they will decide what you're going to do, but every country has the right to reconsider its relations with another state on the basis of what it thinks is against or for its national interest. Americans felt that was something that they would not have liked Pakistan to do, and they made it known. I mean, they were not asking you to let them make your policy decisions, but what they were saying is that, look, if we do this, that will impact our relations with you. And to say that all the states are independent to make their foreign policy, that's just a cliche. I mean, we all know that even major states are not as independent as we journalists would like to believe. I mean, all the states influence each other. All states are often persuaded to do things that they do not like to, so even major world power. So there is no such thing as total independence.
So that means that there is no concept of sovereignty either?
Well, no, that's not true. But see, I mean, the moment we agree to
when I listen to the External Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaishankar, he very clearly mentions that this is not going to be accepted. Why should somebody tell us what to do and what not to do? We will buy oil because it's cheap and it suits us. We will buy S-400 because we need it.
But we always do, don't we? But
we will not utter a word against Russia because that's our foreign policy.
Fine. So they're not saying that you don't make that policy, but what they did was they told us that if you make this policy, these will be the consequences. I mean, what
Well,
we are trying to tell the Americans that, look, we will have an independent foreign policy. We'll go against your wishes, but you need to continue supporting us. What they are saying that you are independent, you can take your decisions, but then do not expect us to continue supporting us, because that will be a disconnect, and we, on that particular issue, will separate paths. We'll do what we'll do, you will do what you will do. Now, if you want to annoy America and continue pursuing your independent policies, you're free to do so, but there will be consequences for it. That is how international relations work.
all right, sir. Let me take this same point to Excellency Jauhar Saleem Saab. Sir, independent foreign policy, is that what we are following, or do you believe that the American pressure on various institutions in Pakistan is of that extent that we'll have to listen to them? We'll do what they'll dictate us to do.
Ours is a very independent foreign policy. And the pressures are there always in all countries. It's not just Pakistan. Even European countries sometimes they're pressured. In fact, countries lobby on certain issues. I mean, they lobby, they try to get the support of other countries, and by various means. But that does not mean that your foreign policy or your foreign policy perspective has to be influenced by that. You have to see where your interests align and where they don't align. And I think Pakistan has been very clear on that. We have had, and we do have, very, very important relationships, both with China and the US. China is our most effective strategic partner. The US, it's also an erstwhile partner. It's our biggest destination for our exports, for instance. It used to be our biggest trading partner. In the same way, we get a lot of FDI from the US, a lot of technology from the US. There have been relations in the area of defense as well, and so many other. There's such a big diaspora living there. We still get a big percentage of our remittances from the US outside the GCC countries. So I think this is a very wholesome relations. But that doesn't mean that you would always think alike on all issues. For instance, we had slightly different perspective on Afghanistan. It was just the US, but also European countries, which had some misconceptions about Pakistan's policy on Afghanistan. But I think that lately that has not been there. So what I'm saying is things change, and you sort of, because you can't have same policies on all global issues. You have to have your own perspectives based on your own national interests and priorities, and there's nothing wrong with it. And other countries would also try to influence your thinking. I mean, that is part of diplomacy. Even, if they do it without pressurizing you in some sort of, in ways that are not really part of the international diplomatic apparatus, then, there could be a problem. But otherwise, it's in diplomacy, it always happens. Countries are trying to win allies on different issues, and they're trying to lobby, and they're trying to propagate their perspective. But you keep a balance. You keep a balance based on what? Based on what is the best for you, based on what is the best for your people, based on what is the best for the country. And that is exactly what Pakistan has been doing. And I don't really see any digression from that. And if you see in recent times, there has been, we are moving towards a better understanding with the US on even those issues where we had divergent opinions or divergent perspectives. So I see some very good signs. For instance, the German foreign minister was recently in Pakistan.
Sir, if you remember, during this war on terror, Pakistan did all what we could have done for the Americans in order to eliminate Al-Qaeda. Now, the interesting part is that not even a single person from Pakistan was involved in 9/11. But the price which we paid, I think that was enormous. Look at the number of people who got killed, who got injured, the kind of economic loss that we all witnessed. Pakistani economy came to a standstill. The whole world grew in the last 2 decades. We were considered a part of AFPAC, always looked at us through the prism of Afghanistan, unfortunately. Most sanctioned ally, sir, interestingly. But still, sir, we have this absolute love affair for the Americans. They are kicking up butt, but sir, we are after them. Honestly, sir, sorry for using this language, but this is what is happening.
I wouldn't put it that way. I think it has to be seen because in terms of diplomacy, it has to be seen in a slightly different light. You see, we had, let's say we had divergent opinions on Afghanistan, like I said. Now, this war on terrorism, we were partners. You would remember we have been partners since 1979. We have been partners on Afghanistan as well.
Partners because the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, they needed us. This time they invaded Afghanistan, they needed us. It is their war which we are fighting and we are paying the price for. When Russia attacks Ukraine, where we have got nothing to do, the Americans and the West, in fact, tell us to support Ukrainians and go against the Russians. I mean, is this what our diplomacy is, sir? That
No,
we'll
but you
keep
have
on
to
listening.
remember-
We say that, well, we're a nuclear power.
I mean, it's very
what do we need to do with that bomb, sir?
President Saab, it's very important to recall we don't fight anybody else's wars. We only fight our own wars, or we were fighting terrorism. What we were doing in Afghanistan was in line with our national policy. So we have never fought other countries' wars.
Sir, but terrorism, I mean this, sir, okay, let me put another question to you, sir. When we talk about Kashmir for that matter, now interestingly, Kashmir, a jugular vein, that's what Qaid said. When you talk to the Indians, they say a two-tongue, good enough, so there is a conflict. They call it a two-tongue, we call it jugular vein, so we won't leave that. Now, sir, yesterday I was watching this young cricketer from Srinagar playing for India, not playing for Pakistan, number one. It's the Indian currency that's being used in Jammu and Kashmir, not Pakistani rupee. It's their terms and conditions apply, not ours, number one. So practically they hold the area illegally or otherwise, that's a separate debate. You talk to the Americans, they say it's a bilateral issue between the two countries. They do not even recognize what United Nations say. And since they pump so much money in the UN, nobody can go against their wish. They want to, I mean, how many times they have actually supported Kashmir cause? Our national interest isn't in alignment with the American national interest. This is what I'm saying, sir. Will you agree with this statement?
Well, I would say that, you see, that is why I was talking in terms of issues. You see, because you can't really holistically, be aligned with another country in terms of your national interest. It's not even possible. It's not even possible between the US and some of its closest partners in Europe. It has never happened. Not even between the US and the UK. There have been eras where they had divergent perceptions on certain issues. Okay, with other countries, there could be more divergence of perceptions, and it also depends on the times. For instance, in the 60s and 70s, some countries were closer than what they are now, It's all based on sort of, the issues and the interests of the country, and the interests of the countries evolve as well, But like I was saying, I think it's very, very important that in the current era, what is important? Geoeconomics is very important, Especially for countries like Pakistan, it's very important to build our economy, to achieve development, and we have to see what factors can contribute to that. In terms of what you said, Jammu and Kashmir dispute, we have a very clear position on that. Our position is that the United Nations Security Council resolutions should be implemented. Now,
so we have a very clear position. It has been 75 years, this case is still pending. And for another 750 years, honestly speaking, nothing is going to happen. Honestly, sir. But sir, I'm so sorry to cut you here, sir. I'm totally running out of time. But I would like to say thank you very much, sir, for your time. And Anwar Iqbal, it was a pleasure having you. Brig, thank you so much for your time as well. And that's all we have for this. Inshallah, I'll see you tomorrow at 8:05 p.m. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.